Hi everyone, this is Shahiroz Walji. I have the greatest pleasure of being here with David Crystal. I've been wanting to interview David Sereda since 2011, so...
Really? What was I doing in 2011?
I'm going to start with a story. So we were driving into Nelson today, and we're driving around, and all of a sudden I see this house, and it's yellow and purple. And so we took a picture of this yellow and purple house. We drive a little bit further, and we see another house, and there's a curtain hanging out of it, and it's yellow and purple, or golden purple. Later in the day, for some reason I wanted to get my hair done, so we were looking for a hair salon. And we finally find a little one, tucked away, and the decor in there, again, is yellow and purple.
And I'm wearing purple and she's wearing yellow.
So I'm thinking this yellow and purple has some kind of significance.
Yes, and I'd love to share something on that
Please.
because this is new to me. And it's beautiful to have that understanding in coming to see us because gold and yellow is very similar. And yellow is being a very brighter tone of gold.
That's right. The sun.
Yes, is really within God and the highest, and owning your own godliness. And purple is really understood as a deep, compassionate nature for humanity. So both those things are within God. Yes.
And we didn't know that you saw a purple and yellow house, and we were purple.
I know.
And
so there is another
there's
significant.
There's a purple amethyst right there,
and there's a purple amethyst right there.
And recently, when I first started using my new staff, we were in the old place, and I was in that half in, half out sleep state, and all of a sudden, this golden yellow bird comes in, and its wings are flapping as fast as a hummingbird.
Wow.
But it's not a hummingbird. This is a bird of God that came out of heaven. And it just brought heaven's glory into the room, and I felt so much holiness. And it was the speed of the wings. I'll never forget how fast it moved. And it's literally only a 10-second experience.
Wow.
But I realized, and there's a theory, that the Ark of the Covenant didn't really have two cherubim on it. You know, and cherubim is like an infant baby with wings.
Right.
It was two
An
birds.
Angel, baby angel.
Two doves.
Two birds.
Two doves.
You know, seraphims are also known in traditional time to be on the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
However, the seraphim and the dove are very similar in the understanding of the swiftness of action to God in the highest.
And well, we know that the birds tend to be a precursor to a spiritual event or a spiritual
the Holy
prophet,
Spirit appears as a bird.
You know,
the Holy Spirit especially is within the dove.
That's right.
Yes.
And I saw the dove the other night. I had my staff on, and again I was falling asleep, but it was pure white this time. And again, the holiness strikes you because when you feel the bird of God come upon you, it's... For me, what happened the other night was, oh my God, you're human, and this bird, the light is so holy and so perfect and so clean.
Wow.
And it's funny to me because Crystal loves everything clean and fresh. Like, there can't be a stain on anything. And that's how, you can't imagine, like, being in heaven and the saints wearing clothes with stains on them. And when I eat my pasta, I get an olive oil stain in my shirt, and if it doesn't come out, it goes in the trash.
Wow.
So I'm beginning
we have a special bin next to the regular trash can for clothing.
But this bird was so perfectly. It's not just how clean it was and its feathers were; it's how pure the feeling was.
So can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
In regards to birds, has anything occurred previous to this bird incident in your life that you can tell us about?
Well, birds can also, like, this happened to us several times in our life where, like, Astari and I were, when they were building the house in the spring, finishing it, we were at the pump house, and a bird crashed into the window and died right in front of us.
Wow.
And then Crystal's grandpa died within 2 weeks of that. And
mostly
condolences.
Tweety birds, which I call birds who love to nest in the trees. Mostly they come to warn us or give us a sign, a premonition of loved ones who are ready to pass. we find that happens consistently throughout our lives.
There's a book called The Conference of the Bird, written by a Sufi saint, and it's about how all these birds go on a journey, and when they're going on this journey and they're making different excuses to go, not to go, but eventually what happens is those who make excuses don't go, and the ones that do ends up being 13 of them. And when they actually get there, the message that they get, that they're not 13, they're actually one, and they're one being that's going there. It's a
well,
beautiful,
when you have the 12 points of the circle, or the 12 staffs representatives of God and the 12 tribes of Israel, the 13th is the center of the circle. And you can't make points of a circle without a center. Right?
Yeah.
Like when I make my coils, you start with the center, and then you map out your points, right? And then we take the center away, which is like the 13th is hidden.
And you know, that just reminds me of a metaphor of really coming from your heart center.
Absolutely.
Before having a map for yourself. Because really, when you're from that place in the center, then you have a circumference of understanding, because your heart resonates not in just one dimension, but in multiple dimensions. And a circumference of your heart center is really key to understanding both the artwork that David does with the technologies and the metaphor of really applying that to our lives.
So let's talk a little bit about the technology. When does the technology come into your life? Like, what brings it into your life? What started
a temple is the first. To me, a temple is a technology. Because a temple is a frozen wavelength. So we think of a wave, and then you see the waves hitting the dock, and then they move around the dock, and then you see how wave interacts with architecture. But you also see how wave, which is frequency, creates architecture. And so a temple, if it's built with the right dimensions, is a frozen frequency, which still functions as a frequency. And I consider that a technology. In fact, in the Pistis Sophia, which is a very, it's a very not well-known manuscript in the early Gnostic forms of mysticism and knowledge, which even predate Christ and appeared during the period of Christ and after. There is an example of a six-pointed star that's carved into marble, and then you melt down in a crucible these sacred metals, and one of them is mercury, believe it or not.
Wow.
And then you pour it into this pattern, which makes it a coil. Technically, putting wire into a pattern into a flower pattern is very similar to what these Gnostics used to do. And that was taught as that was the center of the temple. So you had to have a coil in the temple. And then when you heat up with fire, stone and conductive material like this molten metal, when it cools down, then you have frequency. So some of the earliest temples had, even in Egypt, they had the digeds and the early tube coils that have been found in Egypt. They had to electrify the space.
So the purpose of it was to electrify the space.
And to create frequency. And to trap a frequency within a cavity. See, a temple is a cavity. And even the way a microwave oven works is you have what's called a magnetron, which is a cavity. It's a box made of steel. And it traps a wavelength in the box, which oscillates around. And then you fire it out into the sky, and you can detect airplanes. And eventually, we learned how to telecommunicate with microwaves. So I believe some of the temples were extremely dense, naturally resonating microwave-type cavities. And they were designed by God, and the instructions and the measurements were given to the prophets. And the prophets always got the same measurement. Right? So, for example, when you finally arrive at this long story, which I talked about earlier today, of how you find the right inch to royal cubit measurement, when you finally get that magic number of 20.605 inches per royal cubit, which is the cubit of God, because in the book of Ezekiel, the messenger of God says a cubit is a cubit and a handbreadth.
Right.
So that eliminates the common cubit, which is just a cubit, which is just elbow to fingertip. But plus a hand breadth means this is a bigger cubit, right?
Right.
And my elbow to finger to hand breadth, including crystals, is 20.605, which is the royal
Yeah.
cubit.
It's amazing.
We measure ourselves, and
well,
we're
you've written a book together called God's Great Pyramids, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and it's all about
that book was an obsession for Crystal. In fact, I had to stop. Like I said, this is taking up all our time, and she came to me one time in the middle of the night, and she said, "You're calculating all these frequencies at the speed of light," but she said the speed of light you're using is slightly wrong. And I said, "How could it be wrong?"
Yeah.
And what I did is, it never made sense to me. How could the speed of light be exactly 186,282 miles per second instead of point something miles? It ends at the 2,
right.
186,282 instead of 182 point something.
So, Crystal, how did you know that?
I just knew instinctually. When you work from your center a lot, you just have feelings about or knowings, not even feelings.
Yeah.
It was just a knowing that it was off and it wasn't precise enough. And sure enough, when he decodes things, he gets down to the exact decimal of everything.
I looked into the early Mickelson Meroe experiments, which were done in Irvine, California, in this tunnel,
Right.
when they were trying to define the speed of light as an absolute measurement. And at the time of Einstein, when Einstein wrote energy is equal to mass times the speed of light squared,
Right.
the speed of light part of that was wrong because he didn't have an accurate speed of light.
Right.
And when the Mickelson-Meroe experiments were done in Irvine, where I worked with top nuclear physicists in nuclear fusion, it turns out that there were more numbers past the decimal point. But when you go on Wikipedia, why don't they have those more numbers?
So if that's, I was just going to ask,
Why do
if
they
that's
teach?
the case, then why is the numeric value we have incorrect?
Yes, but when you go to the metric speed of light
Right.
and use an online calculator and convert it back to miles, there's more numbers after the decimal. And so I compared that to the Mickelson-Meroe experiments, and the metric was more accurate. Because when you convert it back to miles, there's more numbers after the decimal. But it wasn't exactly the same as the Mickelson-Meroe experiments. But how did Crystal know? And she was serious. I was reading a
and it sounds like she was adamantly telling you that.
It's just very matter of fact. I went to him and said, "It's wrong.
Right.
Go find out." That's how we work together.
And I had to rely on a precise number. Like when I took the unfinished square of the capstone of the Great Pyramid. So the Great Pyramid's four sides come up, and it doesn't come to an apex. There's this square base.
Right.
And it's 572 point something inches per side times 4, and the speed of light divided by that, in the precise number that Crystal helped me discover, inspired me to discover, comes to 5.15125 megahertz.
Wow.
And that's the length of the staff of Moses using the right royal cubit inch. You go to Noah's Ark, the boat, 515.125 feet. Now, when there's an archaeologist named, I think it's James Wyatt. He found the remains of the Ark, Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark.
Okay.
The boat on Mount Ararat. And he got out a tape measure. And he measured it at 515 feet. I'm looking for 515.125 feet. Now, but he's using a tape measure, and there's erosion on the wood.
But he's so close to that number.
The wood was petrified. Oh, it is that number. Because you can't see the 0.125.
Right.
But other archaeologists said, well, that couldn't be Noah's Ark because it's much smaller than that, because they used the smaller cubit.
Right.
They didn't read the book of Ezekiel, that it's a cubit and a handbreadth. So they said that couldn't be Noah's Ark. They didn't take him seriously because it was too big. The center line height, and you make 2 circles, and you cross the circles to form the Vesica Pisces. The height of the Vesica Pisces is the height of Noah's Ark.
Wow.
515.125.
So how did you know, Crystal, when he found the formula and it was the correct formula? That again was a knowing for you?
Oh, well, just in reading the material that he discovered and put together on paper, you just have understandings that this is deep, and this is something that hasn't been discovered before, that makes complete sense. So you would just understand it on that level of practicality, and also the depth of understanding within the ancient tools that he used to bring it all together.
So where did your interest come from in all this? Like,
wait a second, before you go further, I made a mistake and I have to correct it. If you take two Vesica Pisces circles whose diameter is the height of Noah's Ark at 515.12 feet, and then you make a Vesica Pisces, the height of the Vesica Pisces is the height of the Great Pyramid.
okay.
So I made a mistake, it's the inverse. So I wanted to correct that.
Thank you.
So I just,
Like,
you know,
where does this all come into your life? At what point?
I just discovered this type of research with David because he
after
was,
meeting him and after getting to know him.
That's right.
Crystal is a trained musician. She trained in opera and
Wow.
jazz and music singing, and she has phenomenal clarity at really high pitches. And
Well, I'm a mezzo-soprano.
Wow.
So
I sing too, and
you do?
my highs are way better than my lows.
Oh,
too.
nice.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah.
Better that way than the
It
other way.
is. Okay.
that's how I got interested in discovering the Great Pyramid music scale out of the Great Pyramid's, frequency calculations. And then
He plays intuitive piano,
Wow.
and there's several songs that he's had that are quite unique and a lot of fun, and also some that are perfect for our children to sleep to.
Wow.
Yes.
yeah, I play intuitive keyboards, I play flute, but everything I've done was intuitive. And when I used to play the flute when I was a kid, I said, this thing, it's off. The music scale is off.
So you knew
And-
innately even back then.
I knew even back then, but when you take the tones, the 12 tones in our music scale, and you have 7 bass tones, and then you have flats and sharps, so it makes 12 tones. But we have really 7 bass tones.
Right.
And you put them in a frequency generator, and you turn the bottom tone on, and the second tone, and the third tone, it wobbles.
Also,
So it means that they're out of phase. They're not in harmony with each other. A, B, C, D, F, G are not in harmony with. So if it was actually Galileo's father, Vincenzo. Galileo, of course, challenged the geocentric view that the Earth was the center of the universe, and went to prison for it. And his dad was a classical composer. Most people don't know this, and he said our music scale is wrong, but they didn't have the answer. So in the Greek system, you have this god Apollo and his sister Athena, and Hermes, his brother, and they create the lyre together, which is the first harp.
Wow.
Right? And this other Greek contemporary comes along, his name is Orpheus. Kind of like Morpheus, the god of dreams, but it's Orpheus. Right. He goes to Egypt and brings back a music scale that is so superior to the Apollo, Athena, and the Greek scale that Zeus is enraged and has them killed. But before then, the Orphics used to go door to door like the Jehovah's Witnesses and play music and convert people to this music scale that apparently was unbelievable. Well, it got buried. It was lost. So I believe what we decoded in the Great Pyramid music scale is, well, when you tone test our music scale and you hear the distortion and you tone test the 10 bass tones of the pyramid scale, it's perfect. There's no distortion. And then in a Pythagorean Greek octave is you take a bass note like A 440 hertz or 432 hertz even, and you multiply it by 2.
Right.
Well, I was looking for an octave that would work with the pyramid scale, because when I listen to a Greek A440 and go to 880, there's no distortion on an octave shift, but it's really sharp. It's not smooth. So I decided if the Great Pyramid angle of 51 degrees and 51 minutes and 25 seconds is made out of taking a golden rectangle, so you take the shorter side A times 1.618033987 for the long side,
Right.
and then you make a pyramid out of the middle of it, the angle of the pyramid is 51 degrees, 51 minutes. So
Wow.
that meant that was going to be my octave. So I did everything times 1.618033987,
which is the golden mean.
and it was perfect.
Wow.
It didn't matter how many octaves up or down I went. When I retone tested up, it
why
was
did you
perfect.
choose the golden mean to?
Because that was what created the pyramid angle.
Wow.
A golden rectangle creates the pyramid angle of 51 degrees and 51 minutes. So when I did that, the entire pyramid math showed me a mid-scale, a minor scale, and a major scale. And each scale had 120 tones. So all three scales gave me 360 tones that are all audible range, that as there are 360 degrees in a circle. So it was just all perfect. It was too perfect. And that led to Crystal and I doing the musical tones for the chorus together, and she started toning with her voice at these various intervals and pitches.
The tones
based on the new scale that you guys discovered.
Based on the new harmonic scale.
So you can sing in that scale.
You can tone to it just as if you're toning to a crystal bowl. Right. However, this scale is really amazing and superior because it actually amplifies your intention. So when you have an intention and you tone to higher frequency and more precise keys that are in a range of God in the highest, then He really hears you, and you can amplify your intention to manifestation.
So then the chakra system, of course, is associated with each of the notes in the 7 scale that we have. So what does that do to the notes that you're toning in the chakra gym?
It would open your chakras and expand your aura more. But more precisely, it would go beyond the orange. And imagine toning with the technology, which amplifies even more so.
Exponentially more, wow.
Yes, then that would be very powerful.
So you transmit the frequencies magnetically through a coil or a wand, and you do the sound at the same time, is what she's saying. And we've done that, and it's amazingly, amazingly powerful on how it shifts your consciousness and your manifestation.
I can imagine.
And even your subconscious as well. And you really get to experience what's in your conscious life in a positive through your subconscious as well. So it merges the two, which is really key because a lot of people don't merge the two together. And sometimes our subconscious really has more lows than the highs of our waking life. Right. However, when you really bring this into your whole being and you tone, because your voice is really your tool.
It's your instrument.
Yes, exactly, your instrument to, call on God in the highest and bring through an awareness to others that resonates with them.
I love to sing. I always say that I discover different aspects of God through singing. I love to sing. I can't stop singing.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And I want to go back just one step. You mentioned how Galileo's dad influenced him. It's true that your dad influenced you somehow, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, my dad left us in a divorce in the 60s revolution in Berkeley, California, and my mom and him broke up and in the late 60s, and then I didn't see him much. Wow. I was raised by a science teacher, a high school science teacher, David Cooper, and I was a Cooper for 5, 6, maybe 7 years. And then my mom sent us back to our real dad because she divorced him. And my dad was, got his PhD at Berkeley in psychology and was studying yoga and meditation. And his thesis for his PhD was in the super learning and healing effects of deep relaxation and meditation.
Wow.
So he really mastered the art of, in yoga, what they call Shavasana, which is learning how to relax at an extremely deep level.
Which David now carries on and has a beautiful CD on.
Course, that's right.
I nursed my my youngest daughter with the deep relaxation CD and meditated with her in the mornings and afternoons, and it really is a wonderful way to connect with your children as well as connecting to yourself and God in the highest.
Can you speak a little bit also about the Quantum Regenesis course?
Oh, well, we haven't done that for a couple of years. But it really is something that was very powerful, had a very powerful effect, and many people, but yet few people around the world got to experience it, and they had very detailed course material from David in regards to geometries that are sacred, but not sacred geometry the way that we know it, but more geometries that are really inherent in the earth and throughout the universe, and understanding that geometry is not perfect.
Right.
You don't have perfect sides on everything, just like you see this crystal.
Yeah.
It's not
It's
perfect sided.
in its imperfection.
That's right. But that's actually a harmony within itself that nature calls to bring more beauty and understanding, so that there's more openings. And so he goes into depth to relay.
Well, in the course we go into breath and toning practices and light practices, and in the 3 series of meditation to get the prana and the life force energy going through the breath, or what the Hebrews call the ruach, the breath of life and the breath of God.
Ruach is the soul, right?
And then learning how to work with tone and pitch to activate your light body, and then to go into real light states of consciousness. But then you eventually reach geometry, and there's a really advanced section in year 2 in the Regenesis course on geometry, and it has the insights to how, when God said in the Bible that God created the world in 6 days, of course nobody believes that, who's a scientist, but if you look at every element on the periodic table that's sitting on this earth,
right,
from gold dust to mercury to lithium to hydrogen, oxygen, everything, most of the geometric structures are all 6 base.
right.
They're hexagonal or a cube. Like a cube.
Well, that's right. The periodic table. You talk about that in the God's Great.
The cube is
Principles
6-sided.
well.
So I believe what really happened in Genesis is that the core of creation is God created the universe with the 6. And it's funny because when we met, that was her favorite number, and she didn't know why.
The 6 is really the mother and the sun, so
Wow.
the mother being creation makes sense.
And the sun,
and
under fusion, created 6-base geometries, hexagonal-based geometries, cubes.
So that's
And I believe also
synchronicity.
with restructuring water with the sound of the sun, wasn't that a 6-pointed?
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
star?
most water crystals, or even snowflakes, are 6-base. So.
Right.
I think we just misinterpreted Genesis. I don't believe God created the world in 6 days. Our planet is 4.5 plus 4-point-something billion years old. So there's no way it was created. It's still being created. In fact, it's still being created. So I don't believe it was 6 days.
Other scriptural texts say that for every verse there's 7 meanings. Within 7 there's 7. There's internal meanings and external meanings. I mean, I know, like in Sufi theology, the 6 days of creation are the 6 great prophets, 1,000 years representing each one. So, and so absolutely geometry, I'm sure, fits in there too, because that's the essence of all.
I mean, that's one of the
creation,
things that happens.
Right? It's the essence of all creation.
In religion is you get scientists debating, like you have Darwinism, you have creationism. Did we evolve from apes, or were we suddenly just engineered? And we showed up as humans, and it's an interesting debate. But there's no evidence either way that humans were instantly created, and there was nothing else here.
Yeah.
And there were dinosaurs.
Yeah.
The Bible doesn't treat even the dinosaurs. I mean, so it's
well, it can actually be demonstrated in the Bible that when Adam and Eve were first created, there was people there before them. That can be demonstrated in Genesis even. So
I believe there were other species here, but the Adam and the Eve were a new creation.
Absolutely, they were a new phase, or a new
phase in the creation, and we're flawed at the creation by partaking of the knowledge that produces conflict. Good and evil is the knowledge of conflict. And it's an unsolvable riddle, because no 2 humans can agree on what's good and what's bad.
I wanted to also ask you guys about the devices and the products, and where did those begin? Like, was the pendant the first thing you guys came up with together? Or, like, none of us are wearing pendants today, and I'm always wearing my pendant.
I wear
There
this
you go.
bracelet,
There you go.
which has been charged all the
Awesome.
time. This is an aquamarine.
And you're
This is
wearing
just
bracelet.
something
No,
that
I'm
I-
not wearing anything
that
today.
I made.
This has been treated many times.
Awesome.
Um,
So talk about the pendants first quickly.
So yes, actually, David discovered the pendants by first testing someone's pendant that became our partners at the time, and then testing just natural stones in the yard. And he found that even a natural stone that's not treated has a small amount of energy that can be transmitted. Hence the purpose, the whole movement of walking barefoot and really feeling the ground and the stone beneath you. And then David really took off with a high technology that was developed many times over and improved many times. So it's really I believe the greatest harmonic technology on the planet. And we've done many things, mostly pendants, but also people's own personal jewelry also gets treated.
Yeah.
And we have...
So the magic is in the treatment.
Definitely.
It's in the infusion process to vibrate stones at specific frequencies. But you have to, the first stage I realized is you can't just vibrate a stone and it won't hold any memory. You have to learn how to open up the crystal lattice, like a doorway, to let a vibration go in and then close the door.
Okay.
And so in the beginning I would try, methods of just like you could hold a crystal up and vibrate it, but there would be no memory there. And so I had to find a way to open up the lattice, and that got into studying the orbits of electron shells in different materials.
So there's probably no limit to how big this opening can be, right?
Oh yeah, I mean,
Right.
there's a book I read by Michel Coquette called Stones of the Seven Rays, and it talked about how a single gem could be activated within the walls of a temple. If it was if you had the dome of a church or a temple, you look at the magnification point like a lens, and you'd place the stone in the lens for a year, and then it would be powerful. But a stone put all the ground didn't have very much power, but it had some. So I had to figure out how to do it. And then I also learned from this Russian physicist that he was measuring the auras of different gemstones, and when I saw that different gemstones had different auras, they weren't all uniform, I said,
Because everything does, right?
A gem has an aura. And so I really wanted to look at how to put a special holy frequency vibration into a crystal or a gem as a piece of jewelry. And I can feel, I'm attached to my aquamarine. I used to wear pendants all the time.
Beautiful.
And my kids would, when I'm holding my kids, they just pull them off and break the chain. So then I had these beautiful long beaded necklaces that I treated, and they would just pull the chain and beads fall on the floor. So then I came up
That's
with,
pretty
I
solid.
had to get my frequencies through my aquamarine on my wrist, because there was no other way to keep my jewelry alive. They're going to rip it all to pieces. And of course, Crystal's wearing different things that have been treated. This has been treated in the lab in Sedona, and so is this actually. And you can, when you take it off and you've worn it for a while, then you really feel like, oh my God, there's something missing.
Yeah, missing it.
Even
for sure.
even my pearls have crystal. They're crystal, Swarovski crystal pearls. So crystal really holds the frequencies really well.
And
But metal can be treated as well,
Yeah.
just pure like your bracelets.
Yeah.
And when we had children,
that's a
and you
24
see how
karat
children interact with the energy, they're so much more sensitive than us. Like, it's amazing the experiences our daughters have had around the frequencies. I mean, one time recently, Astaria was playing with her magnets in the presence of the coil, and the magnets were spinning, and I was doing Holy of Holies octaves. So I calculated the octaves of the golden ratio octaves of the Holy of Holies, and I eventually reached the audible range, and we're just transmitting them, she's playing with them. And both her and I, last November, around the 18th, we both had the same dream of
you
the
were
Blue
telling me
Star
that
Lady,
over the phone one night.
the Mother Mary, and she transmitted so much love. I was just crying, just tears pouring down my face. It was the most pure love. And she looked in my spine and she said, these are your sins, which are energy blocks.
Right.
She didn't say you did something wrong.
Yeah, of
she
course.
meant your energy's blocked here and it's blocked
Yeah.
here. And one was behind the chest plate and one was near the base of the spine. And when she showed me, there was so much pain. And then she just raised me up. All the pain was gone and I turned into pure white flaming love. And just tears are pouring down my face.
Wow.
And I wake up in the morning and Astoria said, Blue Star Lady. She saw Blue Star Lady. And so I showed her these pictures and paintings and she said, Blue Star Lady. I saw her last night. And we both had the same experience. We both were exposed to the Holy of Holies frequencies for about a week. So children, and even our daughter Alira, went, and you don't tell your child, I'm doing this frequency tonight, tell me what's happening in the morning. I don't tell them anything.
Right.
I just run a frequency, and Alira had amazing experiences, and
Wow.
I have a whole diary of all of Alira's experiences.
So it's safe, right? The devices.
Oh,
the,
yeah, nobody's
the gems
been-
for
Oh,
children.
for children.
Yeah.
Well, infinities especially is very harmonic, very smooth
Very
and
smooth,
blissful
velvety.
Wow.
frequency for children. And it's it starts at 1.11111 for infinity.
1 to
And-
1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Yes, and
And
then
1 to 2, 2, 2,
continue.
2, 2, 2, 2, and 1. Those are ratios. So they're
Right.
two numbers whose ratio equals that.
So often I get asked what frequency is this and what frequency is that by customers, and I tell them, well, DavidSereda says ratio is more important than frequency.
The ratio, I've done hundreds and hundreds of calculations, and as long as my resolution is similar, even though they're not the same measurement, frequency and ratio are universal numbers. In fact, they're the language of the universe because they're beyond mathematics. And you can use math to prove that they transcend mathematics. So when you have two frequencies together or more that are in perfect ratio, you have differentials between those numbers that are so smooth and velvety, like Crystal says about the infinities, that it just moves the energy along. Whereas a single point frequency all by itself will vibrate, but it won't move the energy. It'll just cause vibration to stay in one point.
Wow.
And you want it to flow. You want it to move in a stream. So you have to use octaves, and you have to use octaves that are in perfect harmonic ratios. And that's what logos means. Logos, see, in the Bible, the Christian Bible, it says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's John 1.
Mm-hmm.
But in the original Greek, which is what it was written, in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God.
Was God.
Well, Logos means perfect harmonic ratio, sets up a perfect harmonic vibration, and that's the definition of God,
How do we know it means that?
because that's the Greek
Wow.
meaning of Logos mathematically.
Wow.
So there is no such thing as the word in because Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are all Greek manuscripts, and then they got translated into Old English in the King James Version, but they're Greek books, so you should read them in the Greek.
In the-
They don't use the word they use the word logos. They never use the word
So
word.
you're suggesting it's a scientific text on some level.
Well, very scientific, because a perfect harmonic logos is based on a perfect harmonic ratio.
Wow.
And that's what music scales are. They're ratios between A, B, C, D, F, G, and the flats and sharps and the octaves. Those are all ratios. But an octave shift in Greek is 1 to 2. And they don't exist you don't see 1 times 2 times 2 times 2 anywhere in nature. But you do see times 1.618 times 1.618 everywhere in nature.
Well, I just
What?
wanted to say that it's beautiful to actually put on the wand at the infinities frequency for children to sleep to,
Right.
because it really helps create a field of awareness of that nurturing and blissful state within God for their sleep.
Wow. On that note, we have to close. But will you guys please allow a part 2 to this interview at some point? And,
Oh yeah, at some point,
Thank you, David. Thank you,
Thank
Crystal.
you. It was
Thank
nice.
you so much.
Thank you.
It was very nice.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.